So it looks like the teasers we're getting in OG is telling us that the OG events are going to play out slightly differently to how they played out originally. So we've got a few indications that we're going to have a red rift instead of a blue rift, bunkers are flashing, TVs are saying it's happening again, indications that things are going to play out a little differently. But there is a couple of glaring parallels with Chapter 1 and Chapter 6, with storyline plots. So we're going to discuss how OG could affect the Chapter 6 storyline and how OG is going to play out for the rest of Chapter OG. There's a lot of things going on in OG and it might have something to do with the Spirit Realm spilling over. This was the trailer for this season. The Death Star blew up, a piece of debris hit the Spirit Realm portal. Kind of going red now. There's a little bit of a red tint to this purple, which I only just noticed now, to be fair. It is a little red. Superman comes in to save the day. And that's how we get the Supernova Academy. Didn't this season, both Chapter 6 Season 3 and Chapter OG Season 4 started on the same day, I believe, which is rather interesting. And still funny to me why they called this season Chapter 6 Season 3 when they had the opportunity to just call both seasons Season 4 will always be a conundrum to me, to be fair. But obviously, we're currently in Fortnite OG. The Visitor is back. He's getting ready on July 26th to fly in that rocket into a rift. Hopefully that will bring in Kevin for Season 4. And of course, nothing instantly suspicious about that. Then the update happened, and that could change everything. So we then had this. It was leaked, because the events were completely unencrypted, and that the rift will now be red. So first signs of the Fortnite Chapter OG seasons being somewhat altered to what we experienced before in the original Chapter 1, and of course I guess a bit OG season, the OG season we had a few seasons ago, also altered from that, because that still had a purple cube. Slightly different because we had the floating island with the cube over the 0 point bunker, which was opened, I do believe. But of course, when that happening, some people are speculating that we will be getting a red cube instead of a purple cube, which I think could be the case. But how far is that going to have a knock-on effect if we do get a red cube? Big changes, I think. Okay, for the OG players that like to play OG, I don't think we'll have any sort of overall effect on gameplay. You'll just be looking at a different color cube, and then I guess some actual in-game events could be a little different, which I'm kind of excited about. I was kind of worried when OG got announced and they did announce that events would be returning. I was like, I hope they do something different. I hope it's from a different angle, a different perspective, because I think that will be kind of fun to see it from a complete different angle. For example, when we had Season 7, as we learn in Zero War, I believe a cosmic storm, because of the events of the butterfly event, caused a part of the ice moon to break off. So I think it'd be kind of cool if we see the butterfly event and we actually see that occur with the ice moon breaking off and going into that season. That'd be kind of cool. But if it's completely changed and we're now getting a red cube, for example, like how much of a knock-on effect that can happen. And my first port of call is Season 5. And I think people like to talk about the old storyline and talk about it's not really connected anymore. And every time people mention that, I'm kind of like, what do you mean? Seriously, what do you mean? So after the events of Season 4, the rocket event with the scientists, we of course got this trailer 12 days ago. So imagine now that'd be a red rift, and the visitor takes off, and some stuff still starts occurring. The worlds start colliding. I think snow and sand are going to come through in that crack and start obviously changing some of the areas. I guess we get the sand biome and the Vikings on top of the hill, and of course Kevin the Cube. So things start rifting out, and then we are introduced to Drift, who's meant to be from our world, and he's somehow found himself in a game. I don't really like looking too much in that part of the story because I just find it a little bit jarring, kind of takes me out of the immersion. But anyway, Drift ends up in that world. And of course, we have the Season 5 storyline. I think that was for funsies, I guess. Yeah, I like to think Drift being from the real, because it does, I get why people find it fun, but for me, breaks me out the immersion. If they bring back the OG storyline, I think the community will be split, not gonna lie. Bro, when is the Fortnite community not split? Drift is actually a very entangled part of what's currently happening in the storyline. People say the storyline's not really connected to the old storyline. Hello? The masks? Drift had one of these masks. It was given to him by still an unknown entity. Even Vi, a member of the Fox clan, was surprised by this development that he had somehow got him one of these masks. And as we found out, they were responsible for the Shattering War and kind of made the Fox clan and River Guard mortal enemies for a while. So I feel like everyone kind of misses the point about Drift. So everyone's talking about the cube possibly being red, which is obviously a big point in that if the OG storyline does change. But now we have the chance to learn the true going-ons behind the scene for Drift's story of how he came into contact with that mask. It'd be nice to get a red version of Drift as well, with some red powers instead of the purple and blue powers he's familiar with. So I think that'd be an interesting angle. And obviously Bright Bummer. Maybe the hinted at relationship. Obviously on the tree, didn't you? You had it crossed out, didn't you? You had the BB and what was Drift? What would have Drift been? Just a D, was it? But anyway, it was Drift. I presume it was Drift. And it was crossed out, wasn't it? It's Chapter 2, Season 2. So maybe we could learn the going-ons around there and how they were corrupted, and we can learn from a very different way. Because obviously some of the quest lines in OG, they don't go very deep, do they? They're very surface level still. But obviously, something's wrong, it's happening again, and maybe next season, for Season 4, we can have found a mask that's weird mask and it's got crazy powers. He's not sure about taking it. Obviously, he does take it at the end because we see this guy. And there's also, don't forget, there's also a Last Reality corrupted version of Drift called Driftwalker, which has a battling fly forth from the Last Reality, and that looks kind of like tendrils as well. Make of that what you will. So they could re-explore this red cube if it does come. This is a lot of if, to be fair, chap. A crazy amount of if. And speculation, of course, but it's fun to talk about. I think it's fun to talk about. So they can just explore something we didn't have a chance to explore back in the day because the storyline was just being born. Baby steps, that's what I'm trying to say. Season 5, OG, will take place to our Chapter 6, Season 4, which is the Bug Invasion season, and we will be playing out an OG invasion as well with the Red Cube and the Last Reality somewhat involved. And then we've got Diego with the Storm King. It's all lining up very nicely, too nicely, which, again, why I can't work out why they called Star Wars the mini-season and didn't call that season Season 3. So this could be Season 4 and next season could be Season 5 and both seasons can be 5 and 4. Missed opportunity if they do indeed connect it. So what if OG is the other side of this bubble? I think it will explain how he got the mask. I think they can use OG to explain how he got the mask and who he got the mask from. The Visitor in particular seems aware that something is off in OG, and so too the Imagined Order. I don't feel like this would be the case if this is somehow the Visitor before we see him in OG, original OG. That just doesn't really make sense with what we get in dialogue-wise. I mean, it could be the case, but they could still use this as a simulated reality perpetrated by the Last Reality because they are indeed captured the Seven. They may have captured Drift, and they're just using the events of OG to act as a narrative to learn more for some reason. I mean, Last Realities did scan our memories during the Rift Tour event, so they've got a track record. So we will get to see events like this again, but with a red cube. Obviously, I've done a thumbnail like this. This Loot Lake would actually be terrifying if it was a red cube. Imagine, could people still get eliminated in events at this time? I don't know. People shooting each other and not dying, so maybe not. I can't remember when that actually stopped being a thing. So eventually we would roll into the Butterfly event, which would be the season after. So we're basically in OG and Chapter 6, which will now be Season 4. And this season where we sort of both exploring invasion seasons. Obviously them with the spiders and the spirit realm, and us with the cubes and basically the corruption energy that the cubes have and the husks that took over and the ruins that were around the islands and that were creating these husks. So during Fortnite Mechs Season 6, the Last Reality, of course, the cube was trying to open a portal to the last reality, or let them in, similar to what obviously happened in Chapter 2 Season 8, but on a bigger scale. This actually also let out an energy blast, and that did also send the battle bus flying. This has obviously happened a few times. Chapter 2 Season 6 with Zero Crisis. But it's funny it's happened twice on a similar sort of, I guess, understanding of corruption and that sort of power. Besides the colour changes, what would really change storyline-wise? Again, won't be massive changes, but we can explore deeper what was actually occurring in them days, retold to us in a duplicate, copycat, or maybe it is time travel and we are experiencing this from the past, but we're just seeing it play out differently or from different aspects. Because I think that'd be fun. Because I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions about Chapter 1 which does need exploring, like how Drift came into contact with that mask, how the cube and why the cube was truly sentient. If it was from this sort of angle, it's hard to explain now, but if obviously the spirit realm portal is played into that sort of narrative, because I've always believed that the cubes, the butterflies, are somewhat connected to some spirit or spectral realm, because it just makes sense. The energy they seem to draw from just makes entire sense. Of course, similar to my trade-off theory, now of course we're working to the assumption that OG is some simulated reality where the last reality who chromed the Seven and imprisoned them in this alternate version of OG, and at that point the visitor manages to escape. We pick him up in Chapter 6. Of course, this is very much a theory at this point, but that's what we're looking at in today's live stream. If things can be different or can be changed, or it will just remain mostly similar until the end point, until the end game, essentially, where you can really turn it up, because it depends if they do Chapter 2 and they've still got to follow a narrative from this OG chapter, and we just basically start exploring behind the scenes. This is basically a behind the scenes look of what we didn't see back in those days. I remember when Chapter 1 Season 5 got released and I thought we'd have a story with Drift versus Ragnarok. See, that's another interesting, there's many parallels that could come in later seasons of Chapter 6. So we've got the bug invasion theme next season, and we've got the cube coming to OG, and then in Season 6 we will still be going through that with the cube making its way to Loot Lake, and then obviously trying to take the 0 point and obviously bring the last reality through. And then obviously we would have Chapter 7's around the corner, where we still be through Chapter 1, where we have a Norse chapter possibly coming through. So that could somehow tie in with Ragnarok and that sort of stuff. I mean, unironically, you got them running together as well. So actually a pretty good split screen here, where you essentially have Ragnarok and Drift here. So we have this Japanese themed season where we have the Fox clan, the masks, and obviously Thousand Faces, Diego and his grandparents and his ancestors. And we also have this possibility where we start to move through Chapter 7 when Season OG and Chapter OG is still happening, and we can somehow blend the story we have now to the next one, which will be the Norse mythology, and somehow incorporate Ragnarok somehow in that and make him a main protagonist or main antagonist going forward with OG, or not. See, there's so many possibilities that Fortnite could do here. It's actually crazy how many possibilities they have. So yeah, hold on, I'm trying to remember in relation to this image we have here, when could the Norse season come in, or the Norse chapter, which I think the Norse season is meant to be Chapter 7 Season 2, and obviously I think it will be the overarching theme of the chapter, like with Chapter 6 being Japanese theme. Obviously Season 6 OG is actually called Darkness Rises, which will obviously be between Season 5, which could be where Diego and maybe the Spirit Realm takes over Onoshima, and obviously we're then approaching Chapter 7, the new map at that point. And in OG, you essentially have the Darkness Rise in OG with the cubes and what's going on there. Again, another parallel with the story. Fortnite loves parallels. Remember back in, was it Chapter 2 where people kept going, wow, they're going backward? No, oh my god, no. The parallel was with Chapter 2 and the crew skins. So every time a crew skin came out, people tried to make a connection with it, which kind of worked for a bit, but I think Fortnite loves a parallel If they're trying to explain something in story, it's probably happened before and they're just retelling it differently. They love a parallel. So another thing that OG could retell the story of, and I think I would love to know about this character and these guys, or these characters, or this faction, which we still don't really know a lot about or know. In Chapter 1 lore, you would have had this mentioned to you every single video because they were mostly a pretty big part of most people's theories. And of course, if you were around back in those days, you probably know them as the Elementals. And when the cosmic storm, which we found out in Zero War, the cosmic storm caused by the butterfly event, which was this guy here, apparently broke off the bit of the ice moon. That's how the story goes, I believe. And then of course, we had the Ice King come, which not at the point we somehow had Father Christmas come. Maybe that's why the item shop is Christmas at the moment, who knows. But he brought the Infinity Blade, which is actually a collab item. But yeah, we have the whole story about the Ice King, which could obviously be told from another angle. This is what I want OG to explore, because there's so much we don't know about the events of OG. We know a linear path with the events of OG. Cube traveled to lake, it melted in lake, it started flying after the darkness tried to rise, and it literally rose because obviously they pulled the island from Loot Lake. It then sent off to an in-between, which actually is probably a point to make here, actually, because oh my god, there's some dialogue, isn't there, with Hope about I envision this realm between reality. No, okay, so you might not say that, but I'm envisioning a place and it seems like it's in between reality or something, or it's not quite around reality. But the interesting point about this will be close in a parallel to the end of this chapter, end of chapter 6 to chapter 7, where we're meant to be heading into this Norse mythology inspired map. And I've always looked at this event, or I've always looked at the in-between as some sort of interlinking sector, like the tree, the Nordic tree. So maybe that could be a parallel there. I'm pretty sure they're meant to be diamonds, but yeah, sure. The new skin that was released today, I think it's called Jewel. She's part of the Supernova Academy, but if you look into her design, it's a kind of chrome style. Create code MRJOY if anyone does buy anything at Fortnite item shop. What's the tagline? Precious and unbreakable. Looks like she got like the Fortress of Solitude on her feet. But yeah, I understand what you say. It's meant to be diamond, isn't it? Really. I think it just ends up looking kind of chromy, unfortunately, because her hair's made of diamond. So I think that's what that's trying to insinuate there. But I get what you're saying. Probably the same with this guy to some degree. Okay. Why is he Dex diamond and the other ones? Okay, so say it's more metallic, wouldn't you? So that's meant to be a jewel and that's meant to be a diamond. Oh, crystalline. Okay. So it's crystals, basically. It's essentially diamonds. Okay. So the Ice King is actually an interesting one. And yeah, sort of remember, guys, that these events will obviously be occurring with a red cube. Possibly. I guess it could still be purple. We could all be mistaken. We could all just be getting very overexcited with the whole red cube theory. Okay, so the OG storyline can look deeper into the character of the Ice King. And the Ice Moon, strange enough, this is why I also believe we don't even have to have time travel here. Because I think like one point everyone forgets about is this guy, this Ice King guy, is insanely overpowered. He is able to literally take that Ice Moon and move it anywhere in the universe, in the Omniverse that he wants to. He is that powerful. After he had a falling out with the prisoner and his other guys around the table, he decided to move the whole thing, take it out of danger, because obviously he was concerned that people would use the weapons he had collected against other people, and that's why he was concerned with the prisoner. So he ended up shifting to somewhere quiet, and instead he managed to find the 0 point, which, to be fair, was a bit stupid. If you're gonna hide the most powerful items in the world somewhere, try not to hide it next to an also more powerful object. Well, no, maybe that was the point, because obviously I always think there's like some sort of defense mechanism as to why people can't easily access the 0 point and why the last reality struggles. So the Ice King may have had an idea. But obviously we've got this red and black style, which would kind of go nicely if we do get a red cube as well. But obviously the Ice Moon can just shift into this simulated, if it's not time travel, reality, and still be how he was after we saw him in Zero War. And he could just shift the moon to this new reality. Because he found the 0 point once. I presume he might be able to find a Zero Shard if he's angry and he's very annoyed with John Jones and Wolverine, and he wants to kind of shown him a thing. So anyway, he can go to OG and make it snow again. Funny enough here, it's kind of all the colours of the cube, apart from the silver one. That kind of throws out a bit. We've got gold, we've got red, we've got blue. We don't actually have a purple Ice King. When this is essentially occurring, it'd be cool to find out what happened between the, which we kind of already know, but there was other guys involved that we didn't see. So it'd be kind of cool to see it from that point. Actually, funny enough, this is probably our best knowledge of Chapter 1, what we kind of know, because we found out most of this in Zero War. The prisoner, the hybrids, how they worked, why he kept things on the moon. And interesting, we also can't forget about the other time traveler in this scenario, because actually thinking about what he had in that loading screen is kind of telling. I know they're some of the biggest instruments of power in the Fortnite known universe. What, did the Ice King die? No, he just refroze himself after the events of Zero War. Again, there's so many parallels that could happen if Fortnite really does explore the possibility of exploring OG further within the story and making several changes. We also have this loading screen that does have the Infinity Blade in the background of Kato Thorn Leia. We obviously also have the Looper calendar, which only has 5 members of 7 and has actually, would I say this is similar sort of writing as to the writing we see in Shima? It's kind of similar. I don't know. I did say it in my other video. It looks similar. We also have this weird thing, which again, I guess season 7, the cubes, it looks kind of like a cube structure. It kind of looks like something that the last reality would have. So we have season 7, possible Nordic like. Actually, no, this is actually based off a Nordic calendar, isn't it? Because I was always disappointed as to why we had a time travel season right after this season, and we didn't run into a prior version of Kato Thorn. Like Kato Thorn, if he did get killed by Shimmerdos, it wouldn't matter to any of his past versions running around in future events, because that would always be his past. Obviously, he still dies in Chapter 4, Season 4, but we can still see him in the future, but a past version of himself. I don't think that affects it, but because he's standing right next to Infinity Blade, they could somehow link in to this. So yeah, you got the Infinity Blade, Season 7. You also got this cube-looking thing that sort of ties in as well, and then you got this Norse mythology thing. So maybe there's a few parallels to have there. So at this point, even though there's a red cube, the events can still play out similar. We just learn a whole lot more about them, and maybe we can add additional things. But it does obviously depend on one massive thing. If the visitor takes off in his rocket, obviously Fortnite said if the coordinates are correct, he could end up in Chapter 6, for example, or somewhere else, and then we're really involved in the OG storyline from then on. Or he could end up in Expeditions. He could end up anywhere. I just think there's a lot of potential here to Fortnite to really lock in. Fortnite, this is your chance. This is your chance to lock in. It's like a what if, but I would always. It doesn't have to be time. You can have this in a pocket dimension, like a thing that's created by the last reality, like Cube Queen in that song. This is all part of the game I made for you. This could be a little reality in a. Actually, don't get me twisted. This is not what I'm saying was the case back in Chapter 3. But imagine the Herald looking at the island from that trailer. That's could be essentially what the Cube Queen is doing to everyone. Or sorry, the last reality. The last reality you're doing when the Herald croned all the members, most of the members of the 7, and they're in this little game. And they needed 7 to carry out the events of the OG seasons for some nefarious purpose. And that's could be happening. Could be. This is still one of the biggest mysteries in Fortnite to this day. I can't replace how the Vault even works in terms of the imagined order and in terms of the 7. Like, we know communications at the end of Season X, that the imagined order gave the impression that they were in control. Our manipulations averted disaster. We were successful. The 7 were successful. Our plans can continue. So it seemed like they were in control, but looking at the technology and looking at the bridge in Chapter 2, or looking at everything like the Oathbound, the Vault just match. It just doesn't correlate to our understanding of the imagined order. I mean, they must have been in control. You clearly have the bunkers, which were imagined order bunkers, which we found out in Chapter 2. Like, the vault keys are the weirdest thing. Like, that doesn't really scream Imagine Order to me. You obviously might have a different opinion in chat, but for me, it just doesn't blend with what we see from the faction. If you combine like the Oathbound and the Reality Warriors at Brutal Bastion, you may get something like this in my head, but still, it's very last reality tech. But I mean, we do have in the Imagine Order base one of the vaulted items in that cube essence thing, locked in a vault, basically a smaller version of it. So maybe they had thousands of years to build a vault, and obviously because of the events at the end, they had to sort of rebuild, so that's why it wasn't the same technology. But to learn more about this technology and what it meant and why the cube wanted to go in there to open it, because that was the idea, because the cube did open the vault, because the cube was dripping in, the water was being emptied, so if someone opened the vault, I would assume the cube somehow did it. And then obviously Singularity was sitting there, and Singularity worked for the Imagined Order. So we still think this is Imagined Order technology, but in my sort of like working it out, there's so much context missing. That's essentially what I'm saying. There's so much context to how did the Imagined Order get to this point, when they had a vault, when they had this sort of mysterious technological advances from the Oathbound to where we see them in chapter 2 trying to rebuild everything. Like, this is crazy to me. So to say the rocket's taken off, the visitor is in chapter 6 somehow, the red cube's taken over, the red cube's gone to the island, lifted the island up. We then get to this point after the Ice King comes on his ice moon, and we've learned so much more backstory at this point to then learn more about this vault. It would, for me, would be excellent. And then we get into Singularity. Her masks, her books, and a tape recorder, or a cassette player. Was the bridge in chapter 1? Well, to our knowledge, the only thing that was here was this. I can't help but lead to the conclusion that somehow I believe the Oathbound, the Imagined Order, the Seven were somehow connected at one point to get here. Obviously, someone we haven't even talked about, and to be fair, Fortnite barely talked about him as well, is Rune. I can't even, like, he's a character that to me is still so unfamiliar. I don't even know anything about Rune. Like, what was it? Obviously, we had the hybrids, which obviously were then connected to, which were also on the Ice Moon. Rune, I guess, would have been there as well. Maybe I'm being silly. Oh yeah, Rune, just a guy. Figment of our imagination, actually. All will fall. Okay, that's not concerning. Rune is the prisoner's right-hand man. Why? Okay, apparently I forgot about this whole entire story. So is Rune part of the whole round table thing then? With the Ice King and the prisoner and, I guess, Rune. Obviously we had the Ice King with his powers and the prisoner and Rune with very similar capabilities as well. See, like, this will be cool to dive into and learn more about, how did I forget this? I feel like this completely just didn't take in my brain, in my cortex. It just went in one ear and out the other. I definitely remember seeing this tweet now. I must have just forgot that this was a thing. So yeah, see, this would be cool to re-experience this thing in another light, and do that in OG. And if, I guess, the chapter 7, chapter 6, because at this point we'd be in chapter 7, if the storyline is somehow connected to the Norse mythology and the rulers of the realms, kind of goes in really nicely with the whole Ice King stuff and obviously the prisoner, and you could somehow work that in. I feel like you would need to retcon. Retcon is not a bad word, by the way. I know with the whole paradigm and singularity thing, for many that's a bad word, and it does have negative connotations with it, but retcon in some regards is an okay thing to do. See, that could, I think that could somehow work in with the Norse mythology. If each chapter 1 OG seasons does somehow connect, like Drift, the Fox Clan, the Mask, the Cube, the Rift, the Rocket event, Daego, his family, the Spires, the Storm King, and that continues to happen, and we get to the case in season 7, season 6, and we do get the Ice King. And if we do get the Ice King, I think they could somehow work in the Norse mythology element of Fortnite. Oh, that's it. I'm starting to remember now. It's such a struggle to remember the old storyline. Ice King, the prisoner, were having fisticuffs, and obviously then Rune being at the volcano starts to then try and hit the polar peak where the Ice King was. And obviously always, you know, I remember now. So it's taken me a little while to reclock where I am in terms of the whole storyline. Okay. Look how cool it is in the background, all these like other islands with lights on. I don't know why he just went for Tilda. What did Ruin have against that? Okie dokie. This is the first instance in terms of reliving the OG storyline where we're going to get the chance of seeing a character that the Fortnite community over for many years, and that is obviously Singularity. And obviously Paradigm piloted this, so how is that going to come? How the hell is that going to work? Actually, no, it still works. You just don't have Paradigm this time. You just have Singularity. Singularity builds it, and Singularity piloted it. So how everyone believed it happened in the first place anyway. Of course, why I mentioned Paradigm's whereabouts is because we're working off the assumption the visitor got chromed. He either escaped and went to OG, or he's in some form of a simulator reality. Obviously, that doesn't apply to Paradigm because she's just lost. Oh, it's kind of bogged in replay. That you can see there's like 2 mechs for when it's like leveling. Oh, look. Yeah, this is kind of, wait, there's 2. That's how it happens. Obviously, we also learn there's obviously more devourers than just this guy. Obviously, some poor artist drew him as a dinosaur instead. Made a new one just in case. Yeah, we might need you. We may need you. Which, ironically, they did actually need. Oh, it'd be so cool just to go over these storylines again and just have a bit more of a definitive answer for some of our questions back then. But obviously, I'm still trying to think of it in terms of this isn't OG in terms of time travel. I know I keep saying this, but I'm just reiterating it to the people listening to why I'm thinking something. I believe that this is, again, pocket dimension, sort of a reality constructed by a zero shard. If a 0 point is powerful enough to create the whole entire Omniverse, I'm pretty sure one piece of zero shard can create a chapter 1 looking island again. Like, if the 0 point is sentient and it's broken itself apart and each one of those pieces then becomes sentient as well, that's sort of also a hard concept to imagine. But wouldn't you, if you're broken and you're scared, which a 0 point can do, it can be petrified, wouldn't you not go back to some familiarity and create an experience that you've experienced before? I think that's very poetic. Okay, that's easy. If the Ice King, where he is now, rifts the Ice Moon back to a 0 shard similar to this, it's very easy to say if another bit of Ice Moon breaks off again, we could have another one of these guys, because there was still a lot of them still frozen in the Ice Moon. Very easy to get both of the same characters back, and we're still moving the story forward, and we're not quite reflecting on what happened before, re-experiencing again, but it might be a bit convoluted how I'm explaining it here, but in my head it works perfectly. That's all I'm saying. But are the writers of Fortnite that meta? Do they think like me? That's what I've got to say. And 9 times out of 10, I'll say a theory. I talked about the Spirit Realm since Chapter 2. I talked about Greek mythology since Chapter 2. I explored all these other avenues with spirits. And I said about Drift's mask back in Chapter 2 being an evil entity. Being probably given by someone not very good and wants evil or they want to corrupt Drift. And look where we are now. Also, I remember someone in my video said I wasn't sure if Chapter 1 had a bubble. But there are incidents in... Damn it! Why quite at that point? Anyway, there are instances where it looks like to have a bubble. Nat would have been one of them where it looks like she hits the bubble and it thingies. But never mind. We won't see it. Don't know what we're going to do about the Visitor, because in our version of events, the Visitor wouldn't be here, obviously. But we can just duplicate another rocket. But the Visitor can come back to OG from this point in Chapter 7, if that indeed what happens. In the Zero War comic, the Ice King said he had a different name. Would that name be... Damn it, that happens one more time! I'm going to fume! Would that name be... Damn it, never mind. In Norse mythology, there isn't a single definition of Ice King. However, several deities and beings are associated with ice and cold winter. Ymir? That's definitely not how you say that. I've butchered that. I have definitively butchered that. Who was born after Elta, dripped from the icy rivers called... Okay, we're not going to try it. I'm going to butcher half of these, but... The idea is they could really work in the Ice King story, prisoner, into Norse mythology pretty easy. And obviously we could have the connection with the Nordic tree, and we can have that. We can be shown that it's connected to Chapter 7 reality, to Chapter 6 reality, Chapter 5 OG, and we can have the OG story, rebuilding out things we've experienced but giving more context. They could easily make the Ice King that round table and that connected to Norse mythology and build off of that entirely. I just thought in my head it'd be funny, the Seven returning, chapter 7. Yeah, the reason why that was funny, because it was so far away at the time. I remember I had a conversation with someone about this about a month ago, and I was like, oh, it was so funny to think that because it was so far away. We were like in chapter 3, chapter 4 at that point. It was like, imagine the 7 played a really big part in chapter 7. That's miles away now. That'd be stupid. Well, here we are. Well, to be fair, no, the 7 are kind of back. We got the Visitor. We're going to have to somehow work in the 7 to OG. They are kind of back. And they're kind of experiencing this world we're not quite sure what it is. You know, it's happening again. Something's different. Something's wrong. So the 7 are kind of back already. Just a season, a couple seasons too early. So yeah, I think they can rework in Norse mythology, Ice King. But obviously, we will then have the end event, where this can really culminate with something in chapter 7, if they do indeed connect it. If OG turns out to be a flip side, it turns out to be a reality that is somehow connected to this Fortnite's version of the Norse mythology tree. Sorry guys, I cannot remember how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. We're just going with that, okay? One of these rifts will be red as well, obviously, of course. That thing over there will be a red cube as well. That was the time period I thought, and yeah, I bet you thought it was funny, Sanctuary, because it was so far away. But here we are, 4 years later. So I'm trying to think where Season X would line us with, because maybe we can see the 7. Maybe at this point the 7 has somehow gotten out of this, I believe, this prisoned reality of OG, and maybe Hope has discovered it, or Jonesy. At the point we're so far into the future here. When I say so far, maybe what, February? At this point it gets a bit convoluted trying to think of, because every time you theorize something from the first point, you can go 2 ways, and then in them 2 ways you can go 4 ways, and then 4 ways you can go 8 ways, and it gets a little bit watered down each time you do that sort of stuff. So essentially how we got into this point, Season 4, the red cube comes, it corrupts Drift, and we see this from a new angle. Someone, maybe Daigo, gives him that Fox Clan mask, and then we see what happens from there. We also see the cube travel to Loot Lake and rip out the Loot Lake house, tries to get into a vault, but this time it probably actually won't be a vault, because I still believe that this will be a reality that is somehow simulated to the original OG, so it would be a 0-point shard, and that's what the last reality, or the spirit realm, and Daigo and the Dark Presence wants, for people that still probably think it's not the last reality, fair enough. And then we go into the next phase in that, which will be the introduction of the Ice King, and maybe Fortnite can use that to incorporate the chapter 7 story, which will be the Norse mythology, because then make the Ice King, the prisoner, and Rune something to do with them lot. So you have continuity. Like this season, Drift, Fox Clan, Daigo, the Thousand Faces, you have parallels. I think they can do it every season. It's just because this is so far into the future, this will be chapter 7, season 4, won't it? And there's no way of me having a parallel, unless I believe that season 4 would be the end event of chapter 4. Wait, and that's too quick. This will be February. See, it's difficult. But, you know, I think there's definitely some avenues to go where Fortnite can literally do some beautiful work with OG and make it really special. Or they could just make it the same. And then that's how the rest of the 7, who are chromed, because the only one that won't be there is Paradigm. And then, as I was saying, I don't know how the Mech and Singularity would work in. And you're trying to, because at the moment it makes sense to believe in that OG is somehow connected to the chroming of the 7 because the Visitor's here. And you can imagine how the rest of the 7 will be at the end event, and the Scientist will be now, obviously, because he initiates that. The hard bit is trying to imagine how Paradigm fits into the Mech, and obviously the season. Okay, she wasn't even there at the Season X event, so it doesn't matter. Or maybe this is time travel, and this is how she was always at the Season X event, because she somehow comes back. So there's that to think of, I suppose. So guys, if you did enjoy this video, because it will be a video, I don't know how I'm going to edit this, but if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Until next time, it's been your boy Mr. J. Next time, bye bye.